Welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout, where we discuss topics in education, charter schools, life in general, and not necessarily in that order. I'm your host, Dr. Sharetta. Come on in and hang out. In this episode, I was privileged to sit down for a conversation with KishaLynn Elliott. KishaLynn is currently Chief Operating Officer of the Monarch School Project. The Monarch School, located in San Diego, is the only educational K-12 public institution in America serving exclusively students who are experiencing homelessness or are likely to experience homelessness. It's a unique public/nonprofit partnership between a public school entity, in this case, San Diego County Office of Education, and a nonprofit entity that helps to support students with wraparound services to meet the numerous social-emotional, health, and other needs of the students. KishaLynn is also an accomplished public speaker. We'll link to her TEDx talk in the show notes. She's an author. I highly recommend part 1 of her memoir called Childish: Stories from the Life of a Young Black Girl, especially if you listen to it on Audible, where she narrates the story. And the second part has been written and is in the process of being recorded in audiobook format as well. KishaLynn and I talk about the resilience that she sees and is actually documented in the students who attend the Monarch School in a longitudinal study, the role of social-emotional learning, the role of mentors and teachers, and much, much more. I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I did interviewing KishaLynn Elliott. KishaLynn, welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout. I really, really appreciate you coming in today.
I'm happy to be here.
I'd like to start out, if you will, with you sharing a bit about your origin story, what your path has been bringing you to the present moment.
Well, it's an appropriate question to ask me on today about my origin story because yesterday was my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I would say that, I am the only child of a single teenage mom who had me in the 80s and raised me on her own across many states and many obstacles, Growing up, I kind of refer to myself as the child of a child and someone who had to grow up with and alongside my mother. And I was born in the Midwest, but we moved pretty quickly to the South, where we lived for most of my childhood, and ended up in Boston, where I graduated from high school. And my mom is originally from Massachusetts as well. So my life journey took her home. When I was in high school, specifically during my senior year in high school, my mother and I were evicted from our home, and we had one of the first of many experiences with homelessness. We were living in a homeless situation during my senior year when I graduated and went to college. And so that trajectory, escaping those circumstances, moving from a homeless situation with my mother and going on to become a first-generation college student, attending a very prestigious college in the South on a full-ride scholarship. That's where my story of struggle, being that child of a child, converges from my mother's, and I grew into my own as an adult in school. A lot of people who know my background because I share this story with them or because they read my books or know anything about me, they ask me, how is it that you have such a positive attitude? How is it that you are so ambitious and tenacious? How is it that those circumstances did not set you back or hold you back? Why didn't you end up like so many other people who come from a similar background? And I've never had a good answer to that question. I would say I didn't used to have a good answer to that question. But the work that I have been doing for the past 10 years at the Monarch School has really enlightened me to my own journey. How can someone come from seemingly nothing and become so much and do so much despite all of the odds? And, some of it is luck, but a lot of it is what I have come to understand to be the core of what is now called social-emotional learning. These are not words that I had when I was 18. These are not words that I had 10 years ago when I started working at Monarch. But I deeply understand now what was really happening in my struggles to turn them into successes. And I deeply understand how possible it is to turn trials into triumph, because I've seen it happen. I've walked that path, and I've watched it happen in the lives of other students that I have worked for and served in my time as an educator.
So we could go a whole bunch of different directions from that. Let's go to, first of all, let's talk about the Monarch School, and then we'll talk about social emotional learning, because some of our listeners may know on a surface level what that means. Others don't. Very few people really know at a deep personal level. But let's start with the Monarch School. So describe, if you would, the Monarch School, what the work is, what your role there is, and how the Monarch School is different from, in reality, any other school in America.
Absolutely. The Monarch School is a magical place, and I experience that magic every day. Everyone who knows and learns about it feels the same way. Monarch has existed in the San Diego community for over 30 years. It started, but it was started by educators who noticed that the unhoused population, the students that were experiencing homelessness, were, number one, not necessarily in schools the way that they needed to be. They weren't able to be. And also, they didn't have a safe place. They didn't have a place to go. So Monarch actually started as a place called The Place. And it was a drop-in center for unhoused youth to come to be off of the streets. And they would participate in arts programming. They would be able to have access to therapy and case management and just support. And that model, there were so many kids showing up in the safe place that the place was, that the educators behind it said, these kids really need a school. So what ended up happening through a lot of political mechanics that I wasn't around for and don't understand, but what ultimately happened is that a federal waiver was built into our law that allowed for a place like the Monarch School to exist. What we specifically do, we are a public nonprofit partnership. So the public side, the San Diego County Office of Education, is our district, for lack of better words. They are the academic engine behind the Monarch School. They use the state funding that they receive as a public school to provide the teachers and the curriculum and the classified staff at the school that every public school has. Then Monarch School Project is the nonprofit side of the partnership. And what we do is that we provide supplemental support and services that are connected to the social emotional learning of our students, so that when a student enrolls at Monarch, they get the fully accredited curriculum and the diplomas and the class and the coursework that every public school student is entitled to, and they receive the social emotional learning support from the Monarch School Project. We provide wraparound services to families and also ongoing and continuing services to alumni. What makes Monarch unique is that because of that special waiver that's built into the education law, we restrict our enrollment to students who can verify that they are experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness as defined by the McKinney-Vento Act. And I want to say for your listeners who may have a monolithic idea of what homelessness is, that homelessness falls on a spectrum. Mm-hmm. So homelessness Yes, it does look like what we see and know and think of when we hear the term homeless. It's the shelters, it's the tents on the street, it's the people sleeping in parks and living in out of cars or in motel rooms. Though that is homelessness, and it is extreme and chronic and traumatic conditions. But homelessness also expands its definition to include circumstances where people may be sheltered. They may be couch surfing and staying with friends and families. They may be doubled and tripled up in a home that is inadequate for a family of that size. They may be temporarily housed in a transitional shelter, but when their time is up, they go right back to experiencing homelessness. All of those conditions meet the definition of homelessness per the McKinney-Vento Act, and those are the students that we are able to serve at the Monarch School. We are a K-12 public school, which means that we're serving the entire adolescent spectrum. And I actually, because we continue working with adults, I like to refer to us as more like a K-20 school.
Right.
And so we are the only public school in the nation that exclusively serves K-12 students who are experiencing homelessness. And that's what makes us unique on the surface. But then when you look beyond the surface and see how our partnership functions with SDCOE and the academic side, and Monarch School Project, the nonprofit, bringing in the social-emotional learning, the family alumni engagement, and all of the development and communication work that's necessary to provide that supplemental support, it makes it a unique and fascinating and, quite frankly, a magical place to visit and be.
I can say, just from my own experience of having visited the campus and just for some of our sporting events and walking through even just the main lobby and seeing the artwork that's there, you get a feeling right away that the campus is something different is different and very special is happening there. I know you've got, I think it's called Chrysalis.
Yes.
That's kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yes. And so I mentioned that the Monarch School Project, the nonprofit, provides social-emotional learning and support to our families and our alumni. On the social-emotional learning side, one of the most powerful programs, we called it extracurricular activities when I was in school. But at Monarch, when we look at the arts, we understand that the ability to learn and use artistic expression is a part of the healing of the trauma that these students are carrying and experiencing because they are living or in the conditions of homelessness. Art and access to the art, the ability to explore the art, the ability to exhibit your art is one of the most healing aspects for our students. And so because we have the amazing support of our community, donors came together to say, if art is working at the Monarch School, let's give students more access to art. And we wanted to do more than just help our students because, quite frankly, Monarch is a very small school. We serve up to 300 kids at that school. We want our reach to be beyond 300 kids. The problem is certainly larger than 300 kids when we're talking about how many unhoused youth are there out there. So the Chrysalis Center for the Arts was an initiative designed to expand one of our most effective social-emotional learning programs, which is art therapy, and creative youth development, and also create a place where not just our students would be able to be served, but the artistic community in San Diego could also have a place that is theirs to learn. And you could bridge these two gaps of look at what we're doing in public education with one of the most vulnerable populations, but look what we're also expanding in the arts and all of the healing and the community togetherness that comes. That's what the Chrysalis is. And what's really special about it is that the students at Monarch were responsible for every aspect of the Chrysalis. They named it. They decided, if you go by the Chrysalis, which is right here in Barrio Logan in San Diego, there's a beautiful mural painted on. The students designed that and painted it. So it's really a space that's the students. It's theirs. And all the learning and art and the growth that happens in there, they own that. We didn't do that for them or give it to them. But also, it's a place that belongs to the community here in Barrio Logan, here in the arts community. And the clamor for space is, it's not a small battle to find places where you can exhibit your art, whether it be theater, dance, or construction, stage design. All of those things are possible at the Chrysalis. And the Chrysalis was possible because of donors who believed in the work that we were doing in the arts as a social emotional learning program at Monarch, and the need to create a space for that impact to reach more people.
So where does someone go if they're interested in finding out more about donating?
The best place to start is our website, which is monarchschools.org. It's schools with an S, even though we are right now one school. Monarchschools.org is the best starting place to find out about our programs. We absolutely benefit and rely on the donations from individuals, corporations, and we get some grant funding. But there's also a tremendous opportunity to contribute to the work we're doing through volunteering. And that is another thing that really makes Monarch unique is how much the community really wraps its arms and its dollars around this location. We have a very robust volunteer workforce that come and help everything from in the classroom to things on the operations side. And also the community provides a substantial amount of in-kind donations because, again, we're serving a unique population. They have unique needs, and we wrap around those by providing basic needs such as clothing, toiletries, access to laundry and shower facilities, all of those tiny things that they just create obstacles
that we take for granted.
Yeah,
right?
And also don't really expect to come to a school and have provided for you or to give you access to. But we know that those are the things that our population needs. So those are the things that we turn to our community and ask them to provide, and they do. So going to our website is a great way to connect in any way that makes sense for you to connect. And obviously getting those dollars to come in is very helpful. Every single dollar goes right back to our mission, which is to nurture the resilience of students and families who are experiencing homelessness through combining social emotional learning with their academic growth.
So everybody check out the website. And drive by the school if you're in San Diego and go and see the beautiful mural, the Chrysalis. That caught my eye, actually. I was going to a basketball game at your campus, but I saw the Chrysalis mural there. It's beautiful. Actually, the way I found out about you initially was through a TEDx talk. And in that talk, and I want to get to, you mentioned a young man, Derek, in there in a minute. But before that, you mentioned social emotional learning, SEL, in that talk. And prior to this conversation today, you and I had started to go down that road. So can you tell us what social emotional learning means to you and for your team at the Monarch School? And then also a little bit about the data piece that you mentioned to me.
Well, so I mentioned I've worked at Monarch it'll be 10 years this month, as a matter of fact. So a solid decade. And I started at Monarch as the director of what's now the director of life skills. And Monarch, the nonprofit, had a model where we were focused on the social growth, the emotional growth, and the life skills growth of our students. And then we were partnering with SDCOE, who was responsible for the academic growth. And that's how we looked at it 10 years ago, because social emotional learning was not something that people were talking about. It wasn't the buzzword. SEL didn't mean back then what it means now. But to me, as the director of life skills programming, I was deeply curious about how do we know what we were doing was working? How could I, as a director of life skills, or my colleague as a director of emotional growth, know that the work that we're doing and the programs and supports that we're offering our students and families, who are unique, and those programs and services are unique, how do we know it's working? And so I just love data. I'm not, I like to say, I'm not a scientist. I just have, I have my education and a deep hunger for curiosity.
Curiosity.
And I really also, I'm kind of accomplishment driven. And so I need some way to measure my progress. So in every program that I was doing, I would do a survey. Where did students start? By the end, where did they end up? And at the end of the year, I started, there was an internship program, and we were able to see the impact. These students who do this program are increasing their employability. They're building these life skills. They have resumes now and bank accounts now. They're learning financial literacy, but all this data. And that was really helping figure out, how can we make these programs better? I became really, really curious about what it would look like for all of our programs to have some way to see the impact of what they were doing. And at the same time, our leader, we, Monarch, having been around for 25 years at that point, were ready to start telling a deeper story of the impact that we were having. And so Monarch partnered with the University of San Diego's Jacobs Institute for Innovation and Education to say, how could we measure the impact of these social growth, emotional growth, and life skills growth programs? How could we look at what we're actually teaching, and is it actually working? And that is where social emotional learning really became centered. And all these research-based measures for these social emotional learning factors, which are things like self-esteem, grit and perseverance, sense of belonging, and ability to regulate your emotions. These are social emotional learning factors that we, in fact, were teaching at the Monarch School. And the study that we put together with USD allowed us to be able to measure the impact, not just for life skills, but for everything. All of our social growth programming. So think about the arts, the chrysalis, which we've already talked about, but also think about athletics. Think about out of school time, like the after school program. Those are social growth programs that are connected to social emotional learning factors like social awareness, social navigation skills. We're measuring that now. On the emotional growth side, thinking about clinical therapy, access to, group and individual counseling, thinking about behavior intervention. Those are programs that we have offering at Monarch, but now we have research-based measures, emotional regulation, self-esteem, really connecting to what impact that we're having. And then on the life skills side, of course, we have college and career transition and SAT and all the things, especially on the high school, all of those programs and services. But the study is helping us to measure what the impact is on students' valuing of school, their ability to apply what they're learning, and their ability to exercise agency and really kind of guide their own choices and decisions in life. So we put the study together so that we would have a real way to say, this is the impact that we're having on this social emotional learning. And this learning is happening in schools every day alongside the academic growth. But the academic growth was all that was being measured, and that data was all that we were looking at. And so by introducing the study, conducting it over 3 years, really allowing us to be intentional about what we wanted students to learn, but also be reflective of the outcomes that we were getting, it just really provides I feel like a more accurate picture of how our students, how this particular population of students are doing. And it provides some surprises.
Like what?
And that's what my TED Talk was about.
Yeah.
My TEDx talk, my TEDx San Diego talk is titled, Unhoused Youth Are Stronger Than You Think.
Than we think, yep.
And that is not to say that we're walking around here assuming that unhoused students are weak. I don't think anybody could look at someone who's having to endure the conditions of homelessness and say, oh,
that's easy.
They're not strong. Or
Right.
That's easy.
Yeah.
That's a piece of cake.
Right.
I am saying that when we did this study over 3 years, the first 3 years of the study ran from 2016 right through January of 2020. So right up to the doorstep of COVID, which I'll get back to in a moment. But I just said, well, we're looking for growth. We're looking for them to start at this point, and then over time, when you provide this kind of environment, safe environment, and this learning for them, they will grow and become very, very strong. But what we found was that students were already strong. The research-based factors in the study, they're all rated on a 5-point scale where 1 is like the lowest score and 5 is the highest score.
Like a Likert
scale. That's
scale,
correct.
Right.
That's good.
However you pronounce that, I always get it wrong.
It's Likert, and again, you know, not a formally trained scientist, just a deeply curious person. So I've learned a lot over the past 10 years from this. But again, 1 is the low score. We have 13 different factors that we're measuring in our survey. And the average score across all those factors was consistently 3.5 or higher. So when you're already starting at a 3.5, there's not a lot of room for growth. What we learned in that 3 years of the study is that the work that we're doing at Monarch is more about sustaining already exceptionally high social emotional learning capacity more than it is about growing this population from a deficit in social emotional learning. They're already exceptionally high in their social navigation skills. They already have exceptional grit and perseverance capacity.
You think it comes from lived experience?
I think it comes from the human spirit, the human spirit to endure. I think it comes from, you think about what it takes for any student to walk into school, sit in a classroom chair, and receive the learning that is there for them. It's hard for any student.
It's hard.
Especially students in public schools. It's very difficult. When you add to that students who didn't get a good night of sleep, didn't have a safe experience at home, may not have had a meal since they last left school, you think about that and you're going, gosh, that's something really unique and special. That is something surprising. And also, that's not the story that we're focused on when we're talking about this population. And in schools, when we only focus on the academics, there's really not as favorable a conversation to have there because the transiency and there's a tendency for students to fall behind academically because of how often they're having to start over or how often they've been away. So when you only have academic data to look at, you're looking at a deficit-based story in most cases. When you add the SEL in and you see that not only are they high, but at the Monarch School, there's something that we're doing that is helping them to sustain those high levels over a period of time. Now, we don't know, because I'm not researching unhoused students in other schools yet. It could be, but we don't know what the correlations are to that SEL growth if they weren't at a place like Monarch. Right. But what we can absolutely say is that our students come to Monarch, they feel safe, they get very intentional wraparound support that enables them to press a pause button on the effect of the trauma that they're experiencing and just come and be recipients of learning. Come and be within a community where you're valued and belong, not looked at as a charity case or as a homeless student. Right. You're looked at as a human being who is experiencing a traumatic and complex experience and still is able and ready and willing and desiring to learn and grow. Having the data to tell that story is just such a gift. Those students seeing themselves in that way and hearing themselves talked about in this way just really rounds out a very complicated conversation that we're having about unhoused youth in this country. And where I sit with it now and why we're taking the message to the world and really trying to get it out there, how important it is to integrate social emotional learning with academics, which is happening. Schools are picking up SEL curriculum. There's SEL classes. There's SEL programming happening in schools. It's big now, and that's exciting. But what I don't want people to miss is the opportunity to measure the impact of social emotional learning. And that's why I'm so excited that we work with USD to create this tool and we have this data and to get that story out there because we're only able to serve 300 unhoused youth at Monarch. But I assure you, there are unhoused youth sitting in almost every public school classroom in the nation, in the state, in San Diego County. And the same approaches and practices that we do at Monarch will work to benefit those students and all students. I think they all should be able to see this kind of growth. And I want the world to know, because if we can see these kind of outcomes with the students who you wouldn't think, who are defying the odds every day just to walk into school, hungry, tired, afraid, and hurting, learning and growing and being strong in such a way, what does that mean for what we could do for all students in all schools? And don't they all deserve that? Don't they all deserve to see themselves in that way versus only being measured by academics and test scores, which are important, but don't tell the full story of what they're learning or what they're capable of?
One of the things that drew me into the TED Talk was first the title, right? That unhoused students are stronger than you think or than we think. And really that spirit of this isn't a pity project. You know, we tend to like to distill things to their simplest form. Monarch is that school for kids experiencing homelessness. Mm-hmm. But that then unfairly simplifies and characterizes human beings, and that's just one element of their lives. It has an impact, but it's one element. That's really what drew me in. I said, I really need to talk to her because I think we tend to oversimplify. We want 30-second sound bites. And so I hope that, you know, for listeners, if you're drawn to donate or drawn to donate of time or wisdom or wealth to the Monarch schools, that it's done in the spirit of celebration and continuing, you know, to get the average score from a 3.5 to a 5, right? I mean, any school would want that. Absolutely. We want that for staff too.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, and it is embedded into the Monarch School Project's mission. You know, we do nurture resilience because resilience is there. It has to be. Right. Anybody that has experienced homelessness or is experiencing homelessness or may experience homelessness in the future, because it is, like I said, it's a spectrum. You'd be surprised how easy it is to experience homelessness. Anybody who is living in those conditions has innate resiliency. And then we go on to say, our job is to build on the existing strength of students and those families. And that is what is so different from our job is to save them. Our job is to fix them. Our job is to help them pull themselves up. No. Yeah. Our job is to work with them, not do it for them. Right. Work with them to build on the existing strength, not to really tackle the problem, but to focus on the potential that is there. And it is there in every individual and certainly present in this population that we're serving.
So how does the Monarch schools, or the Monarch School, although the website has an S, how do you, as a collaborative endeavor between the nonprofit and the public entity, how does it get staffed? Because I'd imagine that you've got obviously a unique setup. You probably have, at least from the website, I think the average time that a student spends at the school is somewhere around 11 months.
Yeah, it's about a year, school year.
Right. So you've got
spectrum as well.
Right. You have a spectrum on that, but you have transients in terms of folks coming and going and maybe going and coming back.
Yes.
And so this isn't your average school down the street for staff. How does that staffing process happen so that you have the staff coming in the door with the right place in their heart and their own level of resiliency, and then the training? Talk to us about that whole piece.
Well, what I can say on the partnership side, so we, again, our public partner, SDCOE, they provide the teachers and the classified staff. On their team, the teachers, K-12, I think we have one classroom per grade level, K through 8. Okay. And then just like a typical high school multi-subject, the students rotate across 6 or 7 different teachers who provide different learning opportunities. And so that the teachers are consistent, they're stable, and they're committed. They're deeply committed to serving this population of students. That's why they work for the county. That's why they work at the Monarch School. So, and again, we serve 300 kids, right? So the County Office of Education, they have about, I would roughly estimate 40 full-time employees that are present on campus providing that K-12 education and the classified support. So that's the guidance counselor and attendance, enrollment, the principal, vice principal, etc. That's the team on the county side that's working all day, every school day. By the way, Monarch is year round. We do not close. We do not close except for 2 weeks. We get a winter break and a holiday
there's no
break.
6 week summer stuff.
Yeah, no. Our principal likes to say our last day of school is June 30th and our first day of school is July 1, just to really bring it home that we are year round school. Those teachers show up every day to provide the support and the learning on the academic side. On the Monarch School Project side, we have actually substantially expanded our team over the last couple of years to meet the growing need of the students that we serve, but also because we're observing that the number of unhoused youth is only growing, and the only way that we're going to be able to affect change is to be able to scale, to be able to show other people how we do this work at the Monarch campus, how we deploy these approaches, and how we measure their learning. So we've been positioning ourselves to scale. We're working with other schools and organizations serving unhoused youth, showing them this is how we approach behavior intervention. This is how we do therapy, art therapy. This is how we deploy life skills, social growth, and emotional growth curriculum. So you've got about 80 adults on the Monarch School Project side on the BOSA campus providing support to students and families. Now that 80, they're not all in what we would call direct service. There's their family and alumni engagement team, which is more focused on meeting the needs of the caregivers behind the students in these classrooms, as well as meeting the continuing needs of students who have graduated from Monarch School, but are still maybe living in unhoused circumstances or struggling to navigate through those next steps. And then we have a development and communications team. But front facing, what I can say and what I know from the data is that every student that walks into the door at Monarch has access to something like 2 to 3 adults.
Wow.
2 to 3 adults who, and everyone, this is something we measure in the study, identifies that they have a trusting, caring relationship with at least one adult on campus. And if you know anything about trauma, then you know that does not matter how many adverse conditions or traumatic conditions you have endured. It does not matter how long you have endured those adverse traumatic conditions. A lot can be healed and helped by just having one caring adult that you trust. And students at Monarch School, when you add all of the SDCOE staff with all of MSP staff, they have access to over 100 adults. And our students are consistently over time identifying that they are benefiting from that access. Now, how we work together and collaborate, it's really, it's a dance.
I'm sure.
It's a dance that starts at the top level where the principal and the administrators on the county side are working together with us, the executives, and the leadership team on the MSP side to identify problems, to identify opportunities to collaborate and grow, to decide and define what our shared values are and how we're going to operate in community together. But then it also happens at the educator level where we have what are called professional learning communities. I don't know if this is common vernacular in schools, but our PLCs at the Monarch School are not just teachers talking to teachers. They're teachers talking with the social growth team members from MSP, the life skills team members team MSP, the emotional growth team members, the clinicians and behavior interventionists. They're sitting all together saying, what are we teaching? What are students learning? how do we know it's working and how can we do better? And so we use collaborations like that, and that's outside of the classroom. And then in the classroom, you can imagine most classrooms, you've got your kids that are, our classroom ratio, I think we're max at 24 students in a classroom. You've got your classroom teacher and you have a CA. Maybe you have a CA if you're lucky. At the Monarch School, you have that same situation, but then you also have behavior interventionists. You've got coaches, you've got actual therapists that, are pulling kids out and giving them access to therapy and de-escalation support as needed. You've got the parents
I was going to ask you about the parent factor. Yeah.
They're welcome. So what we're doing at Monarch is that we're understanding, especially in this population, the adults need are beneficiaries of social emotional learning too. So adult SEL is happening through the work that Monarch School Project is doing with families. That includes housing navigation, career and employment navigation, and teaching soft skills. Like, they have arts education opportunities for parents. We're even starting to work with the toddlers, the 0 to 4. Creating social emotional learning opportunities at the Chrysalis. Gosh, go see the toddler dance class at the Chrysalis. It'll warm your heart. It will warm your heart. So these are the things that make Monarch unique. This is what the partnership allows us to be able to do that's maybe different than what is available at a public school. The access to all of those adults to provide support, the adults that are trained in trauma-informed care and understand how to work with this population of students and families that are experiencing trauma, and how that affects their brains, their behavior, how they may show up, their progress and their growth. But then you also have the adults collaborating together, and we're looking at all of this data, not just academic data, but we're looking at academic data, social emotional learning data, and school climate data to really help us make intelligent decisions about how do we deploy the limited resources, either the county's resources that they're receiving from state funding or Monarch's resources that we're receiving through donations and community support, so that we can really do the best work that we can for the students that we can serve. And as I've already mentioned, now Monarch School Project has taken up the missive to now let's see what we can do to scale and actually have the approaches and the programs and the support that we provide at Monarch be available to more unhoused youth who may never make their way down to the BOSA campus, but are sitting in someone's classroom today somewhere, hopefully, learning and growing. And so that's what we're doing together. And it's really amazing. It's strange for me to kind of be a voice of this because of the data and the TED Talk and everything, but this is really not about me or Monarch at all. Right. This is very, very much about the students. This is their data. These are their outcomes. This is their growth and their work. It's their learning. And I just feel honored to be a part of it. And I'm really happy to be here on this program and all of the other places that I've gone to kind of share the message that, there's more to be said about homelessness than what we're complaining about as we drive through and around our cities. And there's also more to be said about these students than, poor students and, good luck making it in the world. They are making it in the world. They are making it in the world. And if you create an environment that is safe enough, that is engaging enough, and where those trusting, caring adults are present for them, they will surprise you. They will surprise yourself. And I'm looking towards the future. It's not going to be you and I and these elected officials or these appointed officials or in these classrooms or in these C-level offices. It's going to be the kids that we're teaching now if we do a good job and the right job of cultivating not just their academic growth, but their social emotional learning as well.
I'm sure you have a lot of anecdotes about particular students over the years and remarkable stories of resilience and changes in their lives and growth. Tell us about Derek. You talk about Derek in your TEDx talk and discipline, a different approach to discipline that you take at your school.
Absolutely. So that student who we'll call Derek. The reason that I used that story in my TED Talk was because it gave me an opportunity to introduce another deep passion of mine that's new and I only know about because of my work at the Monarch School, and that is restorative practices. Restorative practices is an approach in schools that's derived from restorative justice. And restorative justice says when harm happens, like a crime, it's not enough to just punish the doer of the crime because that completely disregards the needs of the victim. So a punishment is not enough. Restorative justice creates an environment where someone who has caused harm can sit down and have a conversation with the person that they have harmed, talk about what happened, and answer the key question of what do we need to do to actually make things right, which is not always fully or satisfactorily addressed with a punishment alone. So that's restorative justice. Restorative practices is a model that's being deployed in schools that says if you focus first and foremost on building a strong community where everyone is valued and heard and belongs, that's number one, magic. That's the job. That's the mission. That is what we want. That's what we need. We need to be in community. And it doesn't matter what community you are, how strong it is inevitable that within the context of a community, harm will happen. Maybe it's a behavior challenge. Maybe it's something really egregious like a theft or an act of violence, but harm happens in all communities. And when you take a restorative approach, you say, rather than exclude you from this community because you caused harm, we want to restore. We want to focus on how do we make things right again? Because number one, community matters. So just kicking you out of here we won't be the same community without you. And then you add the layer of, if we kick you out of here, suspend you or expel you, and you don't have a home to go to, what is actually going to happen for you or to you? That approach doesn't work. But the restorative approach allows us to say, everybody here matters. And also, harm is going to occur. Because we're in community together, harm is going to occur. Restorative practices calls us to focus on the repairing the harm of the deed without saying that the person that did the deed is bad. What you did was bad, but you are good and you matter. So that's the approach that we've been taking at Monarch since about 2017, when the County Office of Education trained us all in restorative practices. And as soon as I heard about this, I said, oh, I'm taking this all the way. This is going to change the world, because I too, looking at data, I just said, wow, it's not going to surprise you at all how, that we have behavior challenges. We measure emotional regulation as a social emotional learning factor, and we can see areas for room for growth in that factor as a result of the trauma. But how we handle it and how we respond to it is what's key and what's different. And it's so important to me, because schools that do not use a restorative approach, that rely on a punitive or exclusionary practices alone, are going to disproportionately impact specifically Black students and students with disabilities. And that's just unacceptable to me. Whereas restorative practices actually encourages those students to belong or remain in a community where they belong, actually do the work to repair the harm, which kicking them out doesn't necessarily do anything for whoever was actually harmed, and keep us all learning and growing together. So that's the approach that we take at Monarch School. And then when we started the study, I was so curious about, does this matter? How is this mattering? Is this helping? Is this really a part of the secret of what makes Monarch unique and special? So our SEL study has an experimental construct called restorative mindset. And it's just a set of questions that we ask students that help them tell us, how do you feel about being in community here? Do you understand that is important? And also, as a community, as a member of this community, do you believe that if you make a mistake, you can fix it and you can make it right? So there was no way to measure the impact of restorative practices in schools. We created this SEL factor and put it in our study in 2016. Now, 3 years later, we have a way to see what the impact of being a restorative community is. This restorative mindset measure has consistently been the highest scoring measure year over year in our study. And in this year, the year that we're in right now, we're working with USD to get it validated as an actual research-based construct so that other schools who are adopting these restorative practices and these restorative approaches can measure the impact of that and also have a story to tell about the restorative mindset of their students, because it is exceptionally high. And that is tremendous when you consider that in the absence of approaches like these, the pipeline for where our students could go, especially our Black and Brown students, especially our students that are on IEPs and 504s, is not as promising. And that's just unacceptable to me from a social justice perspective.
When you look at traditional societies, the worst possible thing, and actually often resulted in someone not surviving, someone dying, was to be excluded from a community.
Absolutely.
And so how tragic is it that we instill in the vast majority of our educational institutions, even in 2023, that there's a knee-jerk towards punishment, accumulating demerits, taking away privileges. You see a kid who's had 20, 30 detentions. Like a kindergarten will tell you that it's clearly not working, that students just getting farther and farther and farther pushed away from the community. And then what? Do you face opposition from any fronts when it comes to talking about restorative practice? Because you and I were speaking prior to turning on the recording button, and we're saying, at least my experience is, a lot of people want restorative practices when it comes to their own biological kid, right? What happens? Your kid gets in trouble, you roll into the school and you go, hey, he or she is they're a good kid. You should see, they're really good. This was a mistake. Can we really? But when it's someone else's kid, it's the child of the other. We're not societally so inclined to be restorative.
Right.
Have you faced opposition in your implementation, or are you in a community that is just so kind of like, that's just part of the ethos?
I want to tell you that there's been no opposition at all. And ever since restorative practices landed upon us, we've all just skipped happily down the circular road. And it's just not true.
No.
It's just not true. Here's what we have seen. And here's where the work has landed in recent times. It really does come down to consequences. And in some views, in the views of some educators, and I'm not going to single out teachers versus staff or anything like that, universally, in some views, if there's no consequence, a conversation is not a consequence. And that's restorative practices really invites you to have a conversation. What happened? What were you thinking at the time? How did that affect others? And what can we do to make it right? That's the conversation. And that plan, the answer to the question, what can we do to make it right? That is what you move forward with. And that's what you hope will repair the harm. But what we've learned and come to accept is that consequences are also a teachable moment. And sometimes it is necessary to have a consequence, just like in restorative justice. Just because you have that conversation between the criminal and the victim does not mean that that's going to remove the sentence or whatever the punishment is for the crime. It just adds an actual layer of restoration to the process that is absent when all you do is punish or exclude. So where we are with restorative practices right now is that when there is a consequence, and sometimes, and there needs to be, that's a part of the restorative plan. What do you think needs to happen to make things right? Well, this is going to be a consequence. And we try to make sure that that consequence is not exclusionary. In some cases, for the safety of students and everyone involved, there's a period of exclusion. But then it's about the reintegration. Because it says, okay, you left our community for a while, but now you're back. We don't just drop you back in there and move along. We need to have a restorative conversation to make sure, like, number one, we're glad you're back. Number two, do we remember, or can we create a plan to make things right and prevent future harm in our community? And that is the layer of compromise that has really helped us to get back on track, because initially it was either consequences or it was restorative measures. And it didn't really fall evenly along us.
It's more nuanced than that.
It's
right?
very, very nuanced. And that was creating conflict, because of like, oh, conversation, you're just letting them off easy. Well, I'll tell you, I've facilitated many, many restorative meetings, conversations, and conferences. They are not easy. And it's even harder to implement whatever restorative plan is put into place. But I can also understand that seeming more complex or more involved than just simply saying, get this kid out of here, or this kid's not welcome back here. The people that work at Monarch really have a heart for these students and their families, and really want to try to find a way to meet the needs within the building. And so consequences connected with the restorative plan, if there is a brief period of exclusion, either from the classroom or the school community, really being intentional about what bringing that student back in, or that person back into the community, reintegrating them, making sure everybody understands that this was not just about kicking them out because they did a bad thing. And this was also not about them being a bad person. This is a member of our community. Harm occurred. We want to restore that harm so that we can have that valuable member of our community back. And a part of that restoration may involve a consequence, and we will find one that is appropriate and that provides the right opportunity for reflection and safety that our community deserves.
As somebody myself who had a really tough time in middle school in particular and was suspended a bunch of times in 7th grade, sometimes I think legitimately, and other times I think for strange defiance-related stuff that was an ego reaction on the part of the educators. The only consequence that has stuck with me, and that was a long time ago, that was decades ago, we'll just call it decades ago. The only consequence that has stuck with me was that one of my teachers showed up at my house. I found out later that she had arranged this with my mom, but I had been suspended for multiple days for a fight, and she showed up one night and was like, let's talk, and took me to go get ice cream. It was the most awkward ride of my life. You can imagine, I'm this nervous, awkward middle school kid, and we go and get ice cream, and we're just sitting there in silence. I'm wondering what the heck's going on. And then she started to talk about, we need to make a plan. You're going to be in high school in a couple of years. You need to, like, which path are you going to go down? It wasn't part of some comprehensive restorative approach, but I'll never forget. And this teacher passed away recently, Mrs. Eaton, and I remembered it for the rest of my life. Like, that was something where I said, I got to start to consider my role in this community instead of just acting impulsively or being defiant. Yeah. The other suspensions, I just served my time and tried to avoid my mom at home and tried to avoid chores, and I rolled back into school, and it was awkward because they just opened the door and put me back in. Yeah. That was it. Yeah. Like, hey, where were you? You don't remember? Oh, yeah, you were suspended. That was it. So I really applaud that, and that's something we're trying to incorporate at Albert Einstein Academies.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is why I love, Derek in my TED Talk, Derek's story, because this is a kid who had been in multiple fights, eligible by any definition, any school's definition of the word eligible for suspension or expulsion just because of the safety hazard. And instead, what that kid got was support. He actually got access to a trusting and caring adult who utilized trauma-informed and strength-based approaches, playing games with him, checking in with him to say, hey, what's going on? The behavior that you're showing does not align with the value that I see in you as a human. What's going on? And as they built that relationship, that kid was given an opportunity to go and have that conversation. And in that conversation, do you think that they sit down and say, well, I'm fighting all the time because I don't like you? No. I don't even know how long I'm going to be here. It's only a matter of time. I'm not going to waste time making friends. So trouble. Yeah. But that relationship made them see, oh, I actually do belong here. Oh, I actually do care about my relationships with my peers. I just can't trust it yet. But if I do trust it, I actually can learn something good here, experience something good here. Now, that student, and Derek, of course, is a pseudonym, but that student, he didn't remain at Monarch for long. But the time that he was there, he got more than he would have in any other school that took a simply exclusionary approach to things like fighting, because he got access to healing and growth. He got access to socioemotional learning, and he already had an exceptionally high amount of social awareness. Can you imagine being able to say, no. I just know I'm not going to be here for long, so why do I need to waste time making friends?
Yeah, he knew exactly what a situation was.
Exactly what. And he was just navigating it in a flawed way. Through this relationship, you learn a better way. And that's the way that kept him in our community as long as he needed to be in our community. And it sticks with me all the time, because I think about Derek in any other school would have just been another Black kid that got kicked out for fighting.
Yeah, a statistic.
And if you add the fact that they're unhoused on top of it, it's like, oh, poor thing, and also not my problem anymore. And I just think that that's a tragedy, that we can turn a blind eye to the needs of these kids, not because it's detrimental to them. I mean, that's tragic on the surface. But again, and I say this in my TED Talk, it's really detrimental to us. Who do you think is going to be building and leading society when we're tired or laid to rest? It's going to be the Dereks.
Yeah.
It's going to be the Daves. It's going to be the unhoused youth like KishaLynn was in 1998 that are leading this thing in the future. If we let them, if we heal them enough, if we live and learn in community with them. And that's what I want. That's the message I'm trying to get out. That's the approach that we're trying to scale at Monarch, so that it will in fact affect not just students experiencing homelessness, but all students. This is what our tax dollars should pay for in public education, for students to really be built up in this way. And when you teach them and you look, you will see the progress. And that's what I believe. So don't just teach, but measure. Know for sure. Know for sure. And I want to talk about that because I mentioned in the SEL measurement, we did the study. So exceptional findings, the students came in high, 3.5 across almost all the factors, 3.5 out of a 5, not a lot of room to grow, sustaining those levels as a matter of fact. Fantastic. We last collected data for that study in January of 2020. We were going to wrap the study up. This is fantastic. We have the first and only research on the social emotional learning of unhoused youth in the nation. Monarch School does, because we're the only school in the nation that could exclusively measure. We have a captive audience serving the K-12 population. January of 2020, that's when we last collected data. And then we all know what happened or was happening to the world 60 days later. COVID hit us. And then an almost 2-year school closure and all of the loss in learning that ensued during that time as schools, academic and SEL educators alike, figured out how to pivot to online learning, hybrid learning, or parents just chose to keep their kids out of school altogether to keep them alive during a worldwide pandemic. We came back to school the 21-22 school year. We came back, and I just said, geez, we really need to check in on the social emotional learning of our students, because what the data that we collected between 2016 and 2020 allowed us to see was what was the social emotional learning capacity of this population pre-COVID. And just like we were first and the only to really tell that story with data, then now we're positioned to be the first and the only to tell the story of what were the implications of COVID-19 and the learning loss that happened from the school closure on the social emotional learning of this population. So in the 2023, what was last school year? 2022, 23 school year, we reinstituted our SEL study with the Jacobs Institute at USD. And we got the same protocol that we did for the first 3 years of the study. And we're going to continue on a longitudinal path to see what the social emotional learning impact has been. Just looking at year one, I can tell you that there were some declines.
Understandably.
And also, restorative mindset, still the number one social emotional learning factor. And second, school safety. So Monarch and the way we're approaching students in our restorative practices and our social emotional learning and the way we wrap around and believe in them are helping students to feel safe. They want to be there. They belong. They believe that they belong there. They want to make a positive contribution and get a positive contribution while they're there. Yes, we've slid back a little bit, and especially areas like social navigation, emotional regulation, valuing of school, but again, remember, they're declining from already high levels.
Right.
So, we'll see what it takes over the next 3 years, what it looks like or takes to either grow or sustain from already high levels that there are. But being able to look at what that goofy experience that we all went through, that shared trauma that we all went through, really meant for these students. I can't wait. I can't tell you what it's going to say after only 1 year. I can say, okay, gosh, still a lot of very good surprises and good stories to tell in there. But also just to really understand what almost feels impossible to understand in terms of how quickly how quickly everything stopped and schools closed. And then even how quickly we reopened. And then it was just like, okay, that never happened. Let's all go back to school and continue on our merry way. Like, we're not all hurting and healing from that. Right. And we're not all, really needing more than we needed, in the fall or coming into the spring of 2020. So I'm really, really proud of not just the innovation, but the potentiality of this data, because it's helping us to understand something that really still feels incomprehensible to me when I really think about what 2020, 2021, and the first half of 2022 school year really looked like. Our students did not come back to us the way they left us. No. And we didn't come back to them the way they left us either. And so I'm really excited that we're watching that, and we'll be able to put that alongside, because we got to figure out how to heal that as well. And I believe that the approaches, the team that we have, and the ways that we're looking to measure the outcomes are going to tell a fascinating story 3 years from now, just like they did 3 years ago.
I look forward to seeing that as well.
I will share it and shout it from the rooftops. Have me back on the superintendent's
I'm going to have you back
to talk about what did COVID do to the social emotional learning.
Part 2. So you mentioned that this story is not about you. It's about, it's not even really about the school. It's about the kids, the students. But I do want to speak a little bit about your journey. You're a writer, public speaker, life coach. And I had the distinct privilege of listening to one of your books called Childish, Stories from the Life of a Young Black Girl. First of all, I want to thank you for narrating it yourself. I had a previous, earlier episode with Jesse Leon, who's also from San Diego, and he narrated his book, and I thanked him for that because his story, his voice, and the same for you. So thank you. I feel like I spent 6 hours getting to know you before I ever met you because I heard your voice and went through that journey a little bit with you. How did that book come about? Could you talk to us about the writing process and what it was like for you? It's an intensely personal memoir. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so certainly not a casual thing for you to write. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your support, for reading the book, and for listening to the book, because it is an extra layer of work to, after you already pour your heart out on the page, now you got to get in a studio and start a microphone and like read it out loud. So I'm really glad I put that work in for reasons just like this. At the top of this interview, I talked about my origins, being born a child of a child. And somehow, through all the obstacles that my mom and I went through, and then also I as a child on my own, and kind of in the absence of my mother during times went through, overcame. And so many people have asked me, how did you do that? And one of the unique things about me is, as a child, my mom read to me a lot. She must have started reading to me in the womb or something. But my earliest memories of my mom reading to me, and eventually I learned how to like read on my own, and that very quickly became writing. So once I loved to read, it was my favorite way to escape the trauma that I was living in, was to read. And then I felt like, okay, I can actually create something, an alternative to this, through writing. So I've been writing stories since I was 12 years old. But as an adult, I kept coming back to this question of how did you? And I was like, I don't know. I just know what I went through. And so I decided maybe I should just write the stories. When I decided that I was going to write Childish, and I had outlined the book like 10 years before I ever really started writing it, but I knew the stories that were going to be in it because those are the things that I needed to heal from. Mm. And I thought, if I wrote these things down, what it was like to be the child of a woman who did not want, plan, or wasn't ready to be solely responsible for another life, if I hadn't had to move around and start over so many times, if I hadn't been exposed to the implications of the time, growing up in the 90s or the crack epidemic, if I hadn't, spent time in foster care, if I hadn't been briefly a runaway teen, if none of those happened, I wouldn't be who I am today. I'm grateful for those things happening to me. It sucked while I was going through them, but there was a purpose behind it. And maybe if I write that down, I would feel healed from it. And so I'm going to do that. So I wrote and I published Childish, first collection, Birth to 18. And I put it out into the world because I'd been carrying all of these, and everyone's going, how? And I go, I don't know. This is just what happened. So I'm healing from it. So here's this book. What I did not expect was for people to read that book and reach out to me and say, thank you for telling these stories. Totally answered the question, but also it healed me. Mm. I saw myself. And what's crazy is that these are people who are nothing like me. Right. You got a cisgendered, heterosexual white man telling me your story about this, your story about that girl reminded me of all of, and I said, what? You can write, like, almost like I didn't even write this book for you, but yet people see themselves in it. So I learned that telling your story is healing. Writing it down is healing. I have the power, I have the superpower of words. I have my way with words, but using them to combine with my own pain, my own experiences, and putting it down and out is not only something that heals me, but when other people read it and receive it and see themselves in it, it heals them. And you think I'm addicted to learning and naturally curious? I am fascinated by healing. I am fascinated by what it takes to put yourself back together when the world falls apart. And I've experienced that a lot in my life. Childish was just book 1. There's a whole book 2 that just came out with like what happened next. And
did you narrate it too?
I have not done the audiobook yet. It is scheduled. I am scheduled to record the audiobook.
Okay, because I'm not sure I can read it after. I got to listen to part 2.
So I will let you know. The audiobook, I'm slated. I'm looking to get a holiday release on the audiobook. So it is coming. But there was more there, and that journey continues and will probably always continue. It is just my way of healing out loud. It is my way of bringing purpose to the pain and also sharing and destigmatizing some of these experiences, because while they're very personal and very challenging, they're not very unique.
No,
they're not. There are too many kids out there growing up too soon, having childhoods that are not childlike, being raised by children or not being raised by themselves. And those voices need to be represented. I'm only one of them, but I know by having my voice out there, quite literally in an audiobook, as you pointed out today, it's going to help inspire others. And I'll always do it. If one day I don't work at Monarch anymore, you're always going to find me working with my words. That's my art. And I know the healing power of the arts, like we've already discussed.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your art, and I look forward to part 2 of many more parts.
Yes.
Again, I really appreciate your time today. Your time is precious, and I have just 2 more questions. Who are your role models?
Well, I will really be remiss to say on the 7th day of September, if I didn't say Beyonce. Big Virgo energy coming through into, well, you know what? And that is really true. I'm a big fan of Beyonce. I'm also a big fan of, I relate to how relentless that she is in the pursuit of excellence and quality in her work, innovation, design, pushing herself. I pull a lot of motivational energy from what she puts out as an artist. But the real answer to that question is my mentors. Again, when people ask me, you went through so much. Oh my gosh, you went through so much. How? It all goes back to, gosh, well, it could be just because I'm just awesome, or maybe I was blessed, or maybe I had a guardian angel looking out for me, or I'm just really, really smart. No. It was the presence of those caring and trusting adults. The people, the mentors specifically, some of them who were my teachers, but others who were just adults who said, I see you. I see what you're going through. I believe in you. I want to help you do it. I don't want to do it for you. I want to help you do it. I believe in you. I have had the same mentor since I was a senior in high school. She has been with me since I was 18 years old. I just turned 43. She has definitely been a role model to me. She was an educator when I met her. I was like, I'm never going to work in education. See what happened 20 years in. She worked for a nonprofit. At the time, I said, I don't want to work for free. You're just a volunteer. Are you starving? How do you even eat? Now I am a chief operating officer for a nonprofit organization. She saw my potential as a writer and was telling me first, early, and often that I needed to take writing seriously. And, 10 years ago, she became the editor of Childish. So that's just one of, I could say, easily half a dozen caring adults who went above and beyond to not just teach me or help me, give me a handout or something, but to mentor me. And mentoring relationships are not short-term relationships. They are powerful. I have the best mentors in the world. I couldn't stand here or sit here and do anything that I've done without them. They've done way more for me than Beyonce ever has. However, without them, I can't say where I would be. I can only say where I wouldn't be, and that's right here. So mentors and mentoring is the number one thing. If you want to think, be bigger than, dollars, or even, donations, if you have time to invest your time, your care, your trust to create safety for a young person who needs it, to create a space of positive regard, not only will it help, but the return on that investment is inevitable. Because here I am, again, 20 years later, sitting here in education, in nonprofits, and an author, and an artist, doing everything that mentor and the other mentors planted those seeds in me. Big proponent for mentorship. When I grow up, I want to be a philanthropist, but I am and will always be a mentor, and I am and will always be mentored.
Thank you for that. Shout out to all the mentors. Sometimes we don't always realize at the time that the mentoring relationship starts, and they don't always even realize, right? It kind of grows over time. And
yeah.
So thank you for that. My last question for you. You are given the power of creating your own billboard on the side of, we're going to call it the 5 freeway. I think that's the one closest to your school. You have the opportunity to send a message to the world about your work, about what you value. What does that billboard say?
What is that about our work? That's a good question. There's a billboard on the freeway that I get to send a message about our work. Mm-hmm. And what does that message say?
It could be your collective work. It could be your own individual work. It could be your vision as an artist, an author.
Mm-hmm. I think it would say something like, everything you do matters. So just keep doing something. If you want to know what works, look at what we're doing. And that's Monarch, that's art, that's community, that's all of us. So everything that you do matters. I think that complacency is what's killing society more than anything. I think that the biggest oppression upon us is that so many people have become convinced of the futility of trying. And our spirits are hurting. We're tired. It's hard. It doesn't even matter. It's not about race or class or gender. It's hard for humanity right now. But at the end of the day, the only answer that has consistently worked for me, no matter what I'm facing, whether it's a challenge or a goal, a crazy goal, like give a TED Talk, is to just try. Do something. Keep doing it. And look at what's working and do that. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I do as a coach. That's what I do as a mentor. That's what Monarch is trying to do in terms of scaling. We're saying we figured something out. We got the proof. You can do something. You don't have to just drive down the street and ignore or pity what you see. You can actually do something. And usually it's something small. If you can do more, do more. But start small. Do something. If you're listening to this podcast and you feel something stirring in your heart about Monarch, go to the website and learn more and find something to do. If you listen and you're like, oh, what she said about writing my story down about pain is healing, that resonated with you, do something. Write your story down or set an intention to do that. That is what matters. It is complacency that's killing us. And the oppression is that we somehow become convinced that it's futile. It doesn't matter. I don't want to try. Somebody else will do it. And I have just learned, I've proven that probably the right person to do it is the person that's listening to this right now. Probably the next person to do something could be the person that's listening right now. And I'm listening, and I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. All of it.
Thank you so much, KishaLynn, for joining us today and for that billboard message to wrap up today. And I look forward to our version 2.0 once your data comes out. It was a real pleasure and an honor to chat with you today.
Same, likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Superintendent's Hangout. You can follow me on Twitter at DVS1970. Please be sure to share this show with friends and family on social media and in the real world. Thank you to Brad Bacayal for editing and production assistance, and to Tina Royster for scheduling and logistics. Thanks for hanging out, and have a great day.